Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Roadmap. My name is William Lowe, and I'm here with Preston. Today, we're going to be talking about how you can associate and structure rewards in your exercise program so that you can start to see more tangible changes and see progress in your recovery after stroke. So one of the things which I've learned after talking to a lot of stroke survivors in my own recovery after stroke is that as they go along in their recovery after stroke, it can be extremely difficult to remain motivated, especially when it comes to exercises. And the reason why this happens is because most often, in most cases, stroke survivors are often doing the exact same exercises which they were given when they left therapy through insurance, and nothing's really been changed. And because you're doing the exact same exercise for months on end and for years on end, it can be very hard to see changes, especially when your brain is being exposed to the exact same thing. One of the things which I've noticed in my own recovery, helping myself as well as helping other stroke survivors in their journey as well, is that if you can actually structure your exercises in your recovery after stroke so that your brain is actually able to anticipate some sort of reward or identify that it's actually making progress and it's able to perform an exercise a lot better than before, then this can actually allow your brain to improve a lot quicker. And in turn, it can allow you to become more motivated in your recovery after stroke, knowing that you're able to perform an exercise a lot better than before, and you're able to see the improvements as you progress in that exercise.
Yeah, a
So
lot of people, oh, go ahead. I was going to say a lot of people these days, I think we're going to see more and more of it. People are using gaming systems. I think you're going to eventually, I've seen some therapy games, things that were specifically designed for hand-eye coordination and such for stroke recovery. And they're real motivating. Well, they do a few things. Number one, they engage you in a way that's a little different than, walking laps in a driveway or something. And so you end up doing more and not realizing that you're doing therapy. But it's pretty easy also if you're supposed to grasp the ball or shoot the ducks or whatever, you get a lot of feedback. So you know what I guess part of this, William, maybe is like, knowing what the goal is. And part of setting up like your therapy program to hit these goals is knowing what the goals are, and then setting up stuff that aims for them. That's real easy with video games.
yeah, that's right. And what you said about video games is you've hit the nail on the head, because a lot of stroke studies which they performed, they've actually identified that whenever you exercise with a target in mind, it actually allows your brain to learn a lot quicker because it actually knows that it's doing something correctly. And the reason why this happens and why your brain is actually able to learn a lot quicker is because of something called association learning, which is basically this idea that when your brain is able to anticipate a reward in the way it's able to exercise, and it's able to actually see that it's able to perform something correctly, it's able to actually connect the dots a lot quicker between what it's doing now in your recovery after stroke versus how it used to do it before you actually had your stroke.
Well, and games give you a lot of feedback. I mean, so some of the ones I've done some videoing of some studies using games, and you get positive and negative feedback. So if you miss, you hear a little sound, and if you hit the target, then you hear audio. I would assume that audio becomes part of the reward. The fact that you see that you hit the target and you get a audio feedback as well as a visual feedback that give your brain a pretty good idea that you were successful. Also, in terms of like if you were shooting ducks or something, some of them are set up to go for a minute or whatever, and then they'll show you a score, how many times you hit the target. So you could always be trying to beat the number that you achieved in a minute the last time you did it. So
Yeah, that's right. But I mean, obviously, not every strokes lover can afford to play um, video games or afford to access the technology which would give them access to some of these video games which are catered towards stroke recovery. Um, and in these cases, strokes lovers would have to structure their exercises in a way such that they're able to provide the same feedback which they would typically get from a video game. Um, I mean, I'm just curious going through my own journey. I've encountered several examples of how to actually do this with traditional exercises, such as, for example, if you're learning how to walk again, you might place a piece of electrical tape about 2 feet or about half a feet in front of you so that you can practice that first step. Or you might do something such as picking up a lid, but making sure that your thumb is not clenching and flexing in like this, sorry, whenever you're picking it up, so that your brain actually has a target to aim for. And you know that you're doing it correctly if you're able to keep your thumb straight while doing that task. I'm just curious, Ralph, going through your recovery after stroke, have you come across any exercises where where you've modified them in such a way that you're able to give your brain an indication that it's doing something right and also reward it for doing that exercise correctly?
Um, well, I try to make sort of a game. I mean, not like a video game, but a kind of a little game out of a lot of things. One of the things that I did do, I still do it with, because I did it yesterday when I filled up my car. I don't know why. I guess it started in the kitchen when I put my dinner in the microwave and I'd punch it in for a minute and a half or whatever. I'd play a game, try and work towards balancing on my affected leg. And I would, put my fingers above the counters and touch them and try and see how long I could make it. Of course, you got a clock going there. It's counting down instead of up, but it's easy to do the math. So that's one way. And I then one day I was pumping gas in my car, and I said, well, this is the same sort of thing as warming up your dinner in the microwave. So I made a game out of that, and now, I mean, still to this day, you can't practice balancing on your affected leg too much. So still to this day, when I'm pumping the gas, I watch the counter go round. That kind of like takes my mind off the whole overthinking. I call it overthinking. The technical term is cognitive interference, where your cognitive mind interferes with the kind of the automatic part. So it makes it more automatic when I start paying attention to how many dollars worth of gas I can balance my leg to. And, it's like different pumps pump it. Well, I typically tend to go to the same place, and I'll even go to the same pump if it's open. Pumps pump differently, so it's not like, a stopwatch, because the speed could be different. But, that's not the point. The point is I made it into a game. I get like 2-3 minutes of balancing on my leg every time I fill up, my tank. Same with, heating up my dinner. So, yeah, there's a lot of things like that. Making games out of little tasks, switching, doing everything with your affected hand, switching everything to it, opening the cabinets, just, rather than just sticking the pitcher back in the refrigerator with my unaffected hand, I'd open the refrigerator with my affected hand, put the pitcher in there, open it up, just, try and get everything involved and try and make it into a little thing I did. I still do that with the pitcher of water, because in the beginning, the pitcher would shake. I couldn't hold a full pitcher out fully extended. So, just things like that. What kind of you mentioned tape. What other kinds of other things? And before you do, one of the things that you could do with tape would be, I would imagine you could also tape it every 2 feet or whatever you want, more than one, whatever you wanted to train your step to be, and then you can put your foot on there. Actually, while I was saying that, I do that with tiles. In the States we have a lot of 1 foot square tiles, so you can use them to make sure you put your foot that you're doing the same thing. On my walk to the river, the cracks in the sidewalk are every 5.5 feet. So that's a good long gait for somebody my height, about 6 feet. So when I'm walking to the river, I make sure that every other foot goes on, either my affected foot or my unaffected foot goes on the crack every time. That means that I'm taking 2 even steps and I'm hitting that 5.5 foot mark. So, you make a game out of anything. I'm always doing stuff like that. We're just talking, and I'm thinking about them. Another thing I do is make sure when I'm kicking or raising my doing high stepping, I'll look at the counter, or if I'm and make sure that my knees are coming up equal and make a game out of it. Same with kicking. I sometimes will use the tiles on the floor, the cracks again. So if I'm kicking this foot and kicking this foot, that I'm getting them to the same height. And again, when at least I find when I'm paying attention to getting them to be the same height, I kind of, it becomes more natural because I forget to overthink it. I forget to overlay all that cognitive interference. And what we're all trying to do is get back to natural automatic mode, the way we were before our stroke. We didn't think about any of this stuff pre-stroke. So what kind of other what have you made into games in your recovery?
Well, I mean, there are a lot of so I design exercises for stroke survivors, and there are a lot of exercises which I've modified in such a way that the stroke survivors I help, they can actually see that they're actually improving in them. Um, so I mean, first and foremost, I just want to acknowledge everything you said. Um, all of the examples you mentioned, obviously, they work so well because you were able to notice when you were improving whether you had to pay more for your fuel or pay less for your fuel compared to the last time, and also and also whether or not you were able to extend your arm out a lot more when you were putting the pitcher back into the fridge. Um, so those, I think, because you were able to identify those improvements in the way you perform those exercises, um, I mean, I'm just inclined to ask, did that make you more motivated in continuing with those exercises, knowing that you were looking out for those small, subtle changes?
Um, well, I mean, I'm fairly motivated, so I would typically do it. Like the one that comes to mind is walking where you've got the cracks work out to a nice long step for you, because it becomes continuous. Every other foot you're gonna want to put on. So you're all the time saying, okay, what do I have to do with my affected foot to get to make sure it takes a big enough step? You're just engaging in the exercise or the activity on a greater level when you do something like try and step on all the cracks. Of course, when we were kids, we tried to never step on the cracks. We used to walk home from school and try not to ever step on the cracks. So it's funny because now, and it's awful convenient they happen to pour the concrete every 5.5 feet. Sometimes it's 3 feet, and that's a big stretch for me to hit 3 feet with each foot, each step. But I imagine you could set up your own a similar thing, like in your driveway with pieces of tape, like you were talking about. Um, put 20 or 30 pieces of tape and walk them, turn around, come back. Be a good way to practice lengthening or making sure you take even steps. And that's a big issue for a lot of people. It's funny because they usually don't take as big a step with their unaffected foot because they're used to not being able to weight bear. So they did that whole like shuffle thing. And I found that with a lot of people I work with, when we start getting, pretty good, I'll watch the length of their steps and try and get them to even them out. And so anything you can use like cracks in the sidewalk or some way of measuring, tiles on the floor or whatever, helps you with knowing. I guess that's the whole point. The reward thing would be like that your brain knows what it's supposed to do, and then if you hit all the cracks in the tile floor, then you're reinforcing it because it's very obvious whether or not you put your foot in the right place. So it seems pretty easy to set up a number of things where your brain can anticipate what it's supposed to do. I would assume that's the association and the structure of all this would be setting up something where your brain knows what the target is, therefore knows when you've hit it.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly what you said. I think when you can go into exercise with an agenda of actually making sure that your brain is aiming towards a specific target, then you're actually able to learn things a lot quicker. Because if you adjust to do an exercise such as gripping a hand gripper over and over again, your brain doesn't really have an agenda of what to aim for. It's really just it's really just gripping over and over again. There's no thought which goes into that exercise, and so that can actually lead to bad habits down the line, where the muscles which you use to flex your fingers, they actually become overactive and you can't actually learn how to relax them. Whereas if you were to structure your exercises in such a way so that you're going into them with an agenda of what you want to teach your brain, then you can actually teach your brain and guide it towards the right direction of developing the right habits in order to learn how to do something as well as you used to before you had your stroke. And Ralph has listed a lot of examples here, such as walking and make sure you clear each step using the tiles. But there are many out there. Some examples of exercises which I've thought of to help you progress in your recovery is teaching your brain how to actually control the way that you pour water in a cup. So rather than trying to pour water in the cup and just aiming to fill it up all the way to the top, you could turn it into some sort of game and add an additional sense of challenge by getting a marker and marking maybe 1/3 of the cup and trying to aim to pour water up to that marker and then stopping right before. And by doing this, what you're actually doing is you're actually teaching your brain to actually control those signals in a regulated manner, just like you used to before your stroke. Because I'm assuming before your stroke, you would, unless you wanted to, you would have never just poured water all over the cup until it filled up over the top. You would try and do it in a controlled manner because you wouldn't want things to get messy, obviously. So I think when it comes to exercise, if you can go into your exercise routine and go into your exercise program with an agenda, in that you're structuring your exercise in a way such that you're guiding your brain towards a specific destination, so that it knows what to look out for in order to make sure that it's making progress towards what you're trying to aim for, whether this be improving your walking or improving your ability to use your hand and regulate those signals to open and close your hand a lot better, then it might actually be a lot more effective and motivating, because you know what you're looking out for, and I guess you have a barometer of success in that you know when you're making improvements based on how well you're performing that exercise. And for example, how well you're walking after you've used that tile strategy, or how well you're pouring a glass of water after you've given yourself that additional sense of challenge.
Right, and you know the science behind this is something that you and I've talked about before in your presentation on how the brain makes a blueprint, which is cortical maps. And so what we're talking about here is to design, break down, design, make things measurable for your brain, because when you do that, that facilitates the building of these blueprints or cortical maps, which is the result of which is that you are learning the tasks better. Um, you said something about checking the importance of earlier before we started, checking your work the next day. Why don't you talk a little bit about that before it's time to sign off?
Yeah, sure. So so I think it's really important to check your work and check your progress. Do a little bit of a check-in, or or take a 40,000 foot view every time every time you're performing an exercise in your recovery after stroke. And the reason why I say this is important is because, as a stroke survivor myself, as well as one who helps other stroke survivors in their journey, it can be very hard to see changes on a day-to-day basis. So in order to actually identify something which works, it can actually be really motivating, in that it can actually give you an indication that you're doing something correctly, and that it is possible to recover after stroke. So one of the things I really emphasize to clients I coach, and also to all the stroke survivors who are watching this right now, is to make sure whenever you do your exercises, or as you go along in your exercise program, that every week or every day after, do a little bit of a check-in where you try and send a signal from your brain to try and move your hand, or try and lift up your leg, and see if it feels a little bit easier than before, or see if you've got a little bit more movement compared to before. Because if you're able to do this, and if you're lucky and you're able to identify that you've got a little bit more movement compared to a week before, or compared to a day before, then you're actually associating your brain to anticipate a type of reward when it comes to performing an exercise. And it becomes a lot more motivating to do that exercise over and over again, knowing that you're actually seeing improvements the next day or the next week, until you actually reach your goal of wanting to return to walking again, or being able to have more functional use of your hand in your recovery after stroke. Um, so I guess that's just something which I think is really important. It's also a good way of keeping yourself accountable in your recovery after stroke, rather than just going about with your exercise programs, and not really knowing whether or not you're improving. Because I think improvements in your recovery after stroke, your brain doesn't recover from a stroke like you would from 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 a broken arm. So what you have to do is you have to keep a stern eye on these little light bulb moments, which I like to call them, which your brain has, where it's able to get back a new movement, or able to perform something a lot better than it used to a week before, so that you know that you're on track towards your recovery goals after stroke.
Well, one of the things I'm working on is, and I keep an envelope next to the grab bar. I don't really use the grab bar, but I stand at the counter and I'm trying to get to standing on my affected leg for 30 minutes. So every day I can write it down. If I see, I made 8 minutes yesterday, then I can say, well, if I make 8 minutes again today, then that's good. If I make a little bit more, that's even better. Of course, you can measure how far you walk with various phones and walk and exercise watches and things. You can also count how many how much high stepping or how many sit to stands or whatever you do. And of course, there's some people that use timing. I'm not a big fan of timing because I'm worried that when you start worrying about the clock, you're going to worry more about the clock than form. And I think that in all of this, we always need to factor in form as much as possible, because I found it takes 3 to 4 times longer to unlearn bad habits than it does to learn things the first time. So, especially like in walking, you can't do all 28 or 30 pieces of walking perfectly at once. So one of the things you can do is break it down into subtasks, work on your heel toe pronation, work on your upper leg strength, and don't do as much walking. Work on the pieces, then put it back together, and then you aren't reinforcing the bad habits from when you actually are unable to perform the task perfectly. I believe you call this part practice. So anyway, that's what I've found as far as breaking things down, making them into games, counting. I've never been much on timing. Once I got to a certain walking level and I knew that I could walk a certain distance, I would kind of like keep track of it just to make sure that my walking was staying up where I'd gotten it to. But I don't use a lot of timing, and it might be fine for like picking up pennies and putting them in a jar, or pegboards, or things that don't involve a lot of form. But generally, I've not used personally a lot of timing, counting more. So, anything
Yeah,
else?
so I guess everything you've mentioned with the timing, it makes sense. And I guess what myself and Ralph uh, uh, are trying to share in this discussion we've had today is the idea that if if you can go into your exercise routine or your exercise program with an agenda in mind, that you're actually going to teach your brain something, and you're actually going to guide your brain in the right direction using specific techniques such as using the electrical tape or using styles, then you can actually teach your brain how to perform those movements a lot better by, I guess, giving it the anticipation of rewarding itself for doing something correctly. And by doing this, you can actually remain a lot more motivated in your recovery, because you're able to see the tangible results and changes as they're happening as you improve in your recovery after stroke.
Right, because if you keep track, and even if you're getting small improvements, I mean, up is up, no matter how slow the elevator's going. If you're going up, you're still going up. So that 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 that's a motivating factor I found. That's why I always set small, kind of achievable goals, so I would keep meeting the goals. And anytime you do anything in life, and this is probably particularly true of recovery, the more you think about it, or think about the way your brain works, think about how the exercises that you do and how you structure them are going to play into how the brain works, then you're taking a more focused approach. And when you think about things and take a more focused approach, you typically get better results. And that would be the point of this discussion, I would say.
Yeah, that's right. So I hope you all found this helpful. And before we close up this discussion, is there anything else you wanted to add, Ralph?
I'm good. I think this is a good ending point. So we'll see everybody back. We're going to try and do these most every week. People have responded well to the shorter format, and so we're hoping in 2022 to cover a number of subjects with you. So stick with us and stay tuned.
Is that it?
Yeah, that'll do
Oh,
it. This,
I got to be honest, I felt a little bit rusty.
that what?
I felt a little bit rusty at the start.